Hello and welcome everyone to Hirana's Wars launch party. My name is Brianna Steinfort-Springer. I'm Murasaki's press intern, and I'll be going over the schedule today and introducing the team. So at 4:15, Britta Jensen will be reading from Hirana's War. At 4:20, Brad Wilson will lead the Q&A with Britta. At 4:40 will be time for the audience to ask Britta questions. And finally, at 4:50, Britta will be signing copies of Hirana's War. Now on to team introductions. First up, we have Brad Wilson. He is the developmental editor for Eloia Born and Hirana's War.
I'm just looking for Brad to see if I can find him here.
And there she is. We have Maggie Gentry, the marketing and soulful business support. And finally, we have Vanessa Reiser, who is the creator of the author video we just watched.
Yay! Yeah.
Now that we have introduced everybody, here's Britta Jensen reading from Hirana's War.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to have you here and so excited. If you have your video on, you can feel free to turn your video off. That'd be awesome. And I am so grateful. I have a really fantastic team. Brianna is our intern for public relations at Murasaki Press, and we're really happy to have her. And we are so thankful that everybody has been so gracious about how doing these things over Zoom often means the technology can't quite keep up with all of the fun things we're trying to do. So, so thanks so much for your patience. It's so lovely to have you all here. And so I'm going to read an excerpt from Hirana's War, and it is the sequel to Eloia Born, as most of you know. And there are songs throughout the book. So at the very, very beginning of the book, we have the prologue here. And you can see it's got it's hard to see on the webcam, but it's the opening song is sung throughout the book. And so I'm just going to start and first read it in English and then in Hiranian, and then hopefully I can sing it for you in Hiranian as well. So, prologue. The water is the surface of my drowned heart, flowing where my blood cannot, for it does not exist until you do return, until you return to me. Aizeleut sobishyara, ulemotu fanzelesien, anyakvoshe pamosodyu, ayanyakan sefonshine. Naseriye udais de amor, naseriye udais do amor, ayanyakan sefonshine. Naseriye udais do amor. So traditional Kardush folk tune sung on the round. Chapter 1, Gulnaz. 13 years ago, Thresselmira, planet Hirana. My one defining trait. I knew what I was before anyone else told me. This unspoken power petrified me. We weren't allowed to be afraid. Fear was supposed to have been drummed out of us by age 7. Had I been the only one terrified of being discovered? My heart echoed in my ears before I was shaken from my cot and dumped onto the floor. The rocking motion of the ground and horrible growling couldn't be another test from our teachers. I was frozen in place, unable to move. I knew I had to, but my body was immobilized on the floor. A sickening thud, thud, thud beat outside of me. Think, Gulnaz. Don't be a scared girl. Dissect what's happening. Break it apart in your mind. Was it a sea creature or a prank from a horrible housemate? It was still too dark to see. The booming was closer underneath me, then stirring my insides, buzzing through my skull before it stopped. Must find Yelena, now. No, must wait to be calm. I'll be punished if they see me like this. Nearby groaning was drowned out by another boom, boom, whomp. Thunder? No, thunder you hear but don't feel. Another blast ricocheted inside my chest, my heart speeding up, sweat pouring down my face. Bad to be alone. Go, go, go! I clutched at Yelena, who always slept beside me. She wasn't there. Everything was crooked, sideways. I reached around me, but only felt the stiffness of blankets and bodies gone cold. So dark. The horrible booming thudded through me again and again, a beast tearing at me. I pushed myself off the floor, adjusting to the darkness. Narrow slits of light flickered through cracks in the ceiling. Find the others, I reminded myself. Keep going, block the current of fear. The ground shook as I walked. Wipe your face, I reminded myself. They will beat you if they see. I trembled, stepping over debris scattered across the floor. Slabs of stone blocked me, so I crawled through the kitchen. Another boom knocked me to the ground, and I stayed until the shaking stopped. The moment of silence gave me a second to catch my breath, to listen for others through the thudding of my heartbeat in my ears. An acrid smell wafted in. Drash, Yelena, find them. I pressed forward. Someone moaned and I crawled to them, over a body that made no sound when I landed on it. The rocking started again, the pain in my chest worse, as the boom, boom, whomp reverberated there. I am just a toy in this stone box. Must get out. So that's just from the first chapter of Hirana's War. And I'm gonna take it, give it over to Brianna, and I'm also gonna check and see if Brad is here yet. So Brianna, if you wanna introduce us with our bios, I'll just try to find Brad, okay?
Okay. All right, so next up is the Q&A, but first we're gonna give a little bit more background information on Brad and Britta. So after 20 years backstage in Austin major theaters, Brad returned to school in 2011 to pursue his passion for writing and editing fiction. He holds a Master's of Liberal Arts degree in creative writing from St. Edward's University and is a freelance editor and writer in Central Texas. While he loves working on anything from picture books to historical novels, he's never outgrown his love of spaceships and talking animals. And for Britta Jensen's debut young adult novel, Eloia Born, won the 2019 Writers League of Texas Young Adult Discovery Prize, and reviewers are calling the book both a dystopian narrative and a quest story. It's considered a spiritual successor to Lois Lowry's The Giver and M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. Hirana's War is a sequel to Eloia Born, and many of her stories explore themes of persevering through disability, parental separation, and the intersection of various cultures on new worlds. And it looks like we're just waiting.
We're just waiting for Brad. So if some of you have questions already, feel free to put them into the chat. So if you have questions about the songs, we've got a question here. Was Cartouche inspired by languages you know? Absolutely. It was definitely, I actually was in Finland like 3 years ago, and I heard the language and it sounded so cool and like unusual and awesome. And I was like, oh, and it had this kind of musical flow to it. And so I decided to kind of infuse a little bit of Finnish, Japanese, a little bit of Yoruba. And so I kind of, And then there were just some words that I made up because I was kind of a weird kid, as my parents can attest to. And I would just make up languages on the bus when I was just being silly and stuff. So yeah, so that was kind of fun. Where do you find inspiration for building your characters? That is a great question. I actually got the inspiration for Dex and Leonora from being in a gas station in Germany. And it was quite fun because there was this guy behind me in the who smelled really, really good. Like he had like what I call sexy man cologne. And I was like, oh, he smells so good. And I turned around and he wasn't very good looking. And I felt really bad. And I was like, oh, what would happen if we had a world where people fell in love not for what they see? So yay, Brad is here.
Hi, sorry.
It's okay, don't worry. So this is my wonderful editor, Brad, who's been with me for 2 books. I feel a little sorry for him.
So far, so good.
Yeah, and so thank you, Lexi, for putting the thing into the chat with the playlist. So everybody who comes gets access to the playlist, and I've made one that's really it's kind of a pretty playlist. So I hope you enjoy it. All right, Brad, I am ready for your questions, and I have some for you as well.
Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, starting off with the obvious one to me anyway. So what makes you write? Why do you write? What's your drive?
Sorry, I just realized that my audio was not on the right thing. Sorry about that.
I figured you just left. It was like, okay.
Sorry. Did everybody hear me before then?
I was hearing you.
Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. Can you ask the question again? Sorry.
Yeah. What drives you to write? Why do you write? What's
I think like being bullied as a kid, up until we moved to Japan, I just wrote out a lot of my feelings. And that was definitely a start. Also, I just loved poetry and I loved performing, and I loved how books could transport me from a place of misery to a place of joy really, really fast. And I wanted to do that for other people. And so I think I write because I want to give voice to things that I don't see either in the mainstream, or they're characters that just haunt me. And I'm just like, oh, I want this character to come out. And so I think that's the case with Gulnaz. She was an unexpected addition to and voice. And you also inspired me, giving her more supposed like mic time.
Good.
And then Mikosh was an unexpected, like you told me to kill Mikosh. You're like, she's got to go. And I was like, no, she can't go.
Well, but that's the beauty of it. Hopefully, regardless of whether you take my notes, as long as it inspires you to, make the changes that make it better. So yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what are your influences? Like who or what, or I guess you talked a little bit about life experience, but as far as specific writer influences.
Oh gosh, I think starting out, it was definitely like as a little kid, it was like Judy Blume, Roald Dahl, Jacqueline Woodson. And then as I got older, a lot of works in translation like Emmy Itaranta, The Memory of Water, which you can kind of see behind me over here. Maria Turchaninov, her Berezi series. N.K. Jemisin is like massive influence. She and Becky Chambers are like goddesses. I love them.
Thank you, by the way, for introducing me to Becky Chambers. I still love that.
I know, and she's also she started out as an indie author. So I'm just like,
okay.
Becky Chambers. And I think too, like Matt Haig's Echo Boy, which I have over here. Like I love how he does just like some really awesome stuff with a futuristic world, but it's still about the characters, about like an unusual love story, and like an android that is more human than android, which I'm just like, yes.
Right. So is it characters first and foremost, as far as getting back to the whole Genesis thing? Is it character, not a situation necessarily, or a setting or a world, but
think it's definitely characters first.
Okay.
I think definitely, I sometimes do get down the rabbit hole though, and you've definitely pointed out places where I do that. Where
Well, that's what you pay me for.
I'll be like, cool stuff. Oh my goodness, cool creatures. And then I have to be like, slow down, girl. And so I think it still always comes back to like, you know, with Leonora, like how do circumstances change her? And then how does she in turn change circumstances? Particularly because she's someone who's gentle and kind. And in the middle of a war, you do have to kill people, unfortunately. And I remember that was really hard for me to kind of wrap my head around, just because my dad's in the military. And I'm like, my dad is such a gentle person. He hasn't killed anybody, so don't worry.
Well,
But I remember having those conversations with him.
sure.
And he also, I think, very much inspired me. Like he sends me a postcard a week, and it usually has like a constellation on it. And my mom and he would like both create reading piles for me.
Nice.
And so like, we're like, well, you should read this. Well, you should read that. And so I think they're definitely that inspiration for more character-driven narratives versus world-driven. I still love new cultures because I grew up and lived in so many different places, and often you
Right.
feel like an alien. Like I remember my brother and I having this conversation because I was living in Germany and he moved back to Japan. And he's like, I just feel like a ghost sometimes. Like nobody knows I'm there. And like, I'll kind of pop in and say something in Japanese, then I'll pop out and I'm not there anymore. And I was like, yeah, I feel that way in Germany too sometimes. And so I felt like writing is a way of bringing that to the forefront. And so I feel like those characters and their voices, I think as I try to grow as a writer and as an author, I want to create more and more kind of voice-driven narratives.
Okay. Now, this isn't, I get, it's kind of a non sequitur probably, but it occurred to me for some reason. It came into my brain, so I'm going to ask. As far as the music element in these books, in both of them, but especially in Hirana's War, where it's music as a weapon, and and human voice, and and that kind of stuff as weaponry. It's like, it was there. Where did that come from? To me, that's mind-boggling. Yeah. Now, I love that about the books, but yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize if this is like repeating myself, if some of you have heard this story before. So I used to go out on the hillside around the school that I worked at in Germany. And so you've got like the school here in this little enclave, and then right next door is the target range. And the target range is massive. Like that thing is huge. And so they'll be dropping massive concrete blocks that are the size of bombs, and it will sound like a bomb when it hits the ground. You'll have, aircraft going over. I would drive home and there were machine guns firing over here. And I was like, all it takes is just one guy to turn around and I'm dead, as I'm driving home. But like this one particular day when I'm walking kind of this rim of the school and I hear the artillery, like the 50 round guns going off from the tanks, and also the large kind of launchers that they use. I don't know the word for it. And I was like, okay, so I can feel this like reverberating in my chest, and I feel like I kind of want to die from the sound of it. What would it be like if war was actually pretty? And that was the deadliest thing. What if it was so kind of gentle and sneaky that that's how we got pulled into this kind of evil force that's trying to destroy us? And so I imagined while I was walking this rim, people kind of dancing in the sky to like orchestrations. And so then that's kind of where the idea came from. And I was thinking it would be a short story, but then as the sequel for Aloy Born started to formulate in my head, I was like, no, it needs to go in that. Because that's how the Hiranians and like the two cultural groups in Hirana, the Yerbats and the Kardouche, that's actually how they came to fight with one another to begin with.
Right. Okay. Well, that seems like a good point. Give a little synopsis of Hirana's War.
All right.
Since we're already kind of there.
I'm like, I want to read the back of the book. Um,
Well, why not? That's probably a pretty good one.
Yeah, Lexi wrote it.
Nice.
So, so I feel like it's about, it continues the story of Aloya Born. We find out some surprising things about Dex at the end of Aloya Born, because he ended up going back to Hagoth, and so we find out what happens to him. So in it we have the rebel force from Hirana comes down, and Leonora has to use her gift to be able to use music to both heal and transport people. And she finds out that this gift actually allows her to travel interstellarly, because they use music to actually kind of encase their spirits with sound and like project them across the universe. And I actually had like a molecular biologist who gave me this idea in Germany a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
He was hitting on me in a bar, and he's like, hey, so you write science fiction. Like, what about this idea? Like, the greatest technology is not what we can make with our hands. It's what we can make our biology do. And I was like, oh, I'm writing that down.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so,
it's a great take. Yeah, because I know you often like, well, we've had discussions about, well, is it sci-fi or is it fantasy? Is it sci-fi? And I don't know. To me, it's very much sci-fi. Because all of it is still, yeah, it's just a different kind of science. Instead of the more typical. It's, yeah. I think it's really cool that it's bio-based, biotech and human. Not augmentation, but amplification. Yeah, I think that's a great take on it.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I think I think a criticism I've already received is I don't really explain how it works, except in a few points. And I think it's just because I want it to be more kind of character driven, and I didn't want to get into the technology.
Right.
But maybe someday I will get into it. Maybe when we actually know how something like that would work.
Right.
But I think it's like, I think the main point is, will Leonora save her people? Will she be able to get herself into, will she be able to get herself, trained well enough? And will she and Tarok stay together? Because there's, of course, that new eye candy on,
Right.
on Hirana, which I very much fought against, but somehow he ended up there. And, is Gulnaz going to ruin things? Because she's kind of a nasty piece of work, and also at the same time, really powerful. And is Mikosh going to be an ally to Leonora or not?
Cool. Well, and you named all of your narrators. So yeah, what made you go with 3 different points of view? That's, not the simplest choice to make as a writer.
I know.
First person POVs. And I'm fairly certain I argued against it at some point.
I was about to say that. I was like, yeah, you tried to convince me with Aloya Born to all make it Leonora. Yeah, I had a conversation with the literary agent in London who had the same comment for me. And she said, why have you done this? You're going to have to justify yourself. And I said, well, it doesn't make sense to have a blind narrator, like a visually impaired narrator, and then not have the blind person have a narrative as well. And I also felt that Dex's narrative needed to be there. He just felt really strong. And I think in the second edition that his narrative might come across a little bit better than it did in the first edition. But for the 3 points of view, which you were also like, hey, do you want to maybe just stick to 2? And I felt
no, actually, the version I read, it was just the 2, I thought. That, because was that was a surprise to me when I read the published book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's the beauty or weirdness of freelance editing relationships is it's like, okay, here are my notes, go off and create. I look forward to whatever you do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although you read the beginning again, because you but I think you would only.
Oh, right, that first chapter. That's right.
Yeah, like the first few
right.
like 5 chapters, I think.
That's right.
Yeah, I think like with Gulnaz, I felt like we needed to know what her, like at first she was a very functional narrator. We needed to know how the war first came about on the main island of Hirana. And if you look at the inside cover of the book, it's got the map of Thresselmere,
Right.
which my brother Milo Jens did a really good job with. And so then I felt like she's got, we need that child of war who also is not sure which side she's fighting for, because she's from both cultures
Right.
on the planet. And so I wanted to have that bicultural point of view that was different from Leonora's, because Leonora grew up on just one planet, whereas Gulnaz grew up on a very divided planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and she also has a similar gift to Leonora, but she can't transport people's, like the really, really long distance, like she can't transport a huge amount of people long distances like Leonora is supposed to be able
Right.
to. Yeah. So I think ultimately I like the challenge of writing from multiple points of view. Like I'm reading Uprooted right now, not Uprooted, Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik right now.
Okay.
And that's really cool because she flips points of view in first person all the time.
Gotcha.
And she does it very successfully. So I'm like, ooh, that's lovely. Although she's not writing YA, and I feel like with YA you have to be really careful because I want young readers to not get confused if possible.
Not get confused about the narrator, who's narrating, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the voices, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you, because you do a pretty good job of differentiating them. What are some of your strategies for differentiating first person voices?
I do a lot of like deep character work through like multiple stages of different, almost like diagrams or brain mapping. And
Okay.
then I spend time also like recording myself talking in their voice, which I hate doing. Like I hate talking into a recorder because it's just not very natural for me. And so, and then I'll spend time just like writing down, and I'll have just like weird moments where I'll just be walking, or I'll mostly it's when I'm walking and doing dishes that suddenly like that voice or like a conversation they have with someone else comes out. Like there was a moment distinctly when Gulnaz has a fight with Selçuk, and we hear like I just feel like there was like so much vinegar between the two of them. Or
Yeah,
acid.
their relationship is particularly interesting. Yeah, it's one of my favorites in the book by far.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I think I like to also, when I'm editing, I like to look at the individual dialogue. I still feel like I want to keep working on that because I feel like voice differentiation is something I want to keep like progressing with as an author.
Cool. So let's see. I'm looking at my list here. Sorry, I have to cheat. Bad memory. But, oh, right. So yes, this is a selfish one. So how did editing help you shape your narrative? How does that how does it work from your angle? I know it works from mine, but
Mm-hmm. I think it just gets me out of like this world that I'm inside my head in. Like I think that's what I like about working with you for the developmental edit, and also when I went back again and had you look at it again, because
right.
I just I'll get to a point where I just feel like I can't see anything that makes sense, and I feel really lost. And so once I hand it over to you, you have it for like a month and a half,
Right.
and then I'll actually reread it before it comes back from you, so I'm not like shocked or have that whole like, I feel like every time I get an edit back, I have this kind of burning sensation, and it's not like a good burning sensation inside of my body. And it's like, what did you do? How much do you suck? Which is kind of silly because it's like, I've tried to give you my best work possible.
Sure.
And I think you're really good at like being super honest, but also
Thanks.
because you know me, you're also like, okay, I know she's kind of hard on herself, so I'm gonna just, like there are a couple places where I keep repeating the same word over and over again, and you're like, okay. And I'm like, thank you. So yeah, so I feel like editing, I would never just edit my own novel myself, ever. Like never, never, never. And I edit other
Yeah,
people's novels, and so it's just not fun.
I don't see how it's possible, quite frankly, for a writer to successfully edit
Mhm.
themselves. I mean, they're ones that do it, but so
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking in the chat, but which character was the most fun to write?
I think for Hirana's War, it was definitely Mikosh and Gulnaz with a little dash of Selçuk. Selçuk was hard because he had like this forbidden love I wasn't certain I wanted to be in there. But it was definitely like Gulnaz, just like had, like once I felt like I knew her, I was like, bap, 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 yes. And like if I was having a bad day, I was like, Gulnaz. And so that was really fun. Nice. And I think it was really fun to make up the Hiranian curse words as well.
Yeah,
I liked those.
Those from I liked them. Yeah, I like the addition of the cursing in the language. Yeah, are those based in any sort of language group or anything that you have run across in your travels, or just?
No, I just a word would kind of come to me. Like I would think of like how it sounds and how that I'm trying to think of one of the ones that's like a real, like the biggest, like the deepest insult ever. And I can't seem to find it. Oh yeah. Kundit Mazraha. I was just like, yes. Because like, I mean, yeah, and also in a lot of YA books, you don't want to have actual English curse words because it can be really effective and take someone out of the narrative. But to have their own form of like expletives and just emotional release, I was like, yes.
How much of the foreign languages did you map out? As far as like rules of any grammar rules or
Oh gosh, I really did spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah,
like I have. Yeah.
I'm not surprised to hear that. One, because I've, seen the binder that you bring to our meetings and with the tabs. No, it's great. No, keep doing it. It's a good system. It works. But also just in the reading of it, it doesn't feel haphazard. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do like a full edit of just the language.
Okay.
So I do like 12 passes through the manuscript where I focus on different things. And that does not include the edits that the editors have done. And so I look really specifically at the language because I live in fear of someone being like, oh, the grammatical structure on this page was different than on that page. Yeah. And yeah. I'm happy for someone to do that now because I can be like, oh, really? Thank you so much. Whereas in the past, I would have been like, oh, I missed that. Whereas this time I'm like, no, I did my due diligence. It is now published. It is out in the world. I can.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's obvious you do your due diligence. Yeah. That makes it much easier to work as your editor.
Thank you.
Well, that's one of the great things about working with you is that I'm confident that you've gotten it to as far as you can get it, when I see it, that you're not, because not to disparage, other writers, but, sometimes I think people, are looking more for, well, I can't do it anymore. And, they give up too soon on themselves and on their, free options, quite frankly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually what I learned with Aloya Born. When I got the developmental and copy edit from you, I realized, oh, holy crap. Like I remember you wrote in the margins, I've been through the manuscript 4 times. I just want to let you know that like, this is something that hasn't made sense throughout the manuscript. And I was like, he went through it 4 times? I'm not going through my manuscript enough. Oh my goodness. I need to and it was such a great learning experience for me because I was like, oh, I have to look at my own work just like I look at my clients and my students' work. I need to find a way of depersonalizing it.
Right.
And so I'm curious, like some tips that you have, because we do have some authors out here in our audience. What tips you have for them? Just like a few off the top of your head.
As far as like when interacting with editor tips or writing? Oh, well, as far as interacting with editors, yeah, I mean, like we were just saying, I think especially, because I'm a freelance editor, so I'm different than a publishing house editor, who that's someone who has already fallen in love with your story, and they bought it, and so they're with it, I'm a mercenary who the writer brings in when money is right, when, quite frankly, when she can afford it, and, the time seems right and all that. So, it's definitely a very different relationship. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of, when interacting with editors, it's like, or with freelance editors specifically, because that's really all I can speak to, is, be, be ready for, like you were saying, a level of scrutiny that you haven't gotten from your critique partners. Chances are, I mean, maybe, but, probably not. And I think also, a lot of times I will have authors who get hung up on trying to figure out whether or not I liked their story.
Yeah.
And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. As a freelance editor, quite frankly, that's beside the point. I don't take on a job because I think, oh, based on this, 12-page sample that they, provided me, which is generally about all that there is on that first, the beginning of the relationship, based on this, it's like, I can't say whether or not I like it. I can look at it and say, all right, I can tell that this person has put in a lot of work on this, and that makes me encouraged and want to do it. And also it makes my job more pleasant. Yeah, just plain and simple, because if I spend the whole time, just like fixing the same thing over and over again, and well, you've seen I can get snarky towards the end, in my margin.
Only with a lawyer born, but I think I needed to see that though, because I know what that feels like too with me, where I'm like, really, again, and I was like, oh, I'm doing the same thing.
Right.
And so I think that's really helpful. And so, yeah. So thank you. I thank you for like sharing your insights, because I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to.
Yeah.
And, I'm trying to, I jotted down some other, it's basically the general rule. I think it's for any writer sharing their work with anyone, whether they're paying them or not, it's like, treat them with the respect and appreciation due someone who is taking the time to look at your work in an incomplete state.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like,
Yeah.
and, I'm certainly not saying, oh, it's got to be perfect, because if it was perfect, you wouldn't need to hire an editor. I get that.
And I don't think anybody writes anything perfectly. I think that's the thing, is that like, I think everything has an opportunity to improve. But I think we're getting to the time where we're going to take some Q&A from the chat.
Cool.
So thank you so much, Brad. I totally appreciate.
Yeah.
And let's see if there's anything for you in here as well. Here, I'm going to pull up some questions. Oh, awesome. Okay, here we go. All right. All right. Talk about what it's like to write a sequel in a series. Oh gosh. Yeah, I think so Brad was really good at pointing out ways in which Aloya Born's first edition did not match up with Hirana's War. Thank you, Brad.
Sure.
So I knew that I had to do a second edition of Aloya Born while I was working on Hirana's War, which was not an ideal workflow, but yet it had to be done. And so N.K. Jemisin and also Kristen Kishore both talked about how that they both see sequel writing is the need to make sure that like you've got the full arc figured out, and you want to make sure things that start in the first one match up with the second. And so if you're traditionally published, often you just kind of have to keep going from what you have. Because I'm indie published, meaning I have my own publishing company, I actually could go back and fix it. so that there was a better arc between the two, I hope. You'll let me know if there is. And so I think with the sequel, I wanted the books to be able to stand alone a little bit, so that if someone had not read Aloya Born, they could still follow the like the trajectory of the novels.
Sure.
And so that was a big thing for me, was to make sure that
Oh yeah, that
they could actually pick it up.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's why I just kept getting that feeling, start with Gulnaz, not with Leonora.
Mhm.
Also to see that like Gulnaz had actually watched Leonora's journey a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. That was a great addition. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. You actually, I think you gave me the idea for it, to be honest.
Oh, well, no wonder it was great.
So Cynthia had the question. Thank you, Cynthia. What were some of the biggest differences between the writing process for Aloya Born versus Hirana's War? And Aloya Born, I wrote it in 2013, and I kept workshopping it. It's the third novel that I wrote, second novel, third. I think it was the third novel that I wrote, because I'd written two others before that. And so with Aloya Born, it had a much longer development phase. Like I wrote it in 2013, then worked on some other things and short stories, and just kind of kept going back and forth with it until I really solidified it in 2016, submitted it for awards, and then got some really great critical feedback and revised it. And then when no agents kept telling me it was too niche, it was just too hard to try to pitch it to publishing houses, I decided to go indie with it. And so with Hirana's War, I actually started the rough draft. I had some notes and just a lot of just story building and world building for it, but I actually didn't write the rough draft until the month after Aloya Born was released. So it was an 18-month cycle from writing the rough draft. Brad saw the fourth or fifth draft, I think. And then you saw again, like the ninth draft, I think.
Right.
And so, yeah, so that was a much more compressed timeline, which I don't think I want to do again. I have another book that I've written 2 drafts of called Orphan Pods that I'm working on right now. And for that one, it will be a longer cycle, just because I've discovered I don't like writing so fast anymore.
Yeah, then don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think it had to be done for Hirana's War because there was so much emotional content in it. And I didn't want to stay too long in those dark places.
Right.
I'm just too sensitive of a person to stay in there. And they always tell people, don't be a method actor. Think about your character's objectives, go in deep, and then get out.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of the approach that I took. I took the later Stanislavski character development versus the earlier Stanislavski. Marit, hello, Marit, asked, can you tell me a little bit about inspiration for the series? The inspiration was definitely a combination of events. Like I mentioned, the incident at the gas station in Germany, where, some guy smells really good. So I assume that he's going to be good looking, and he's not. And then I thought about and I felt bad about that was my judgment of him. And I thought about attraction. And then I had,
Sorry, it's my dog. I'm going to mute myself for a minute.
Okay. And I had a visually impaired student that I saw his relationship with a girl that really, really loved him. And just being surrounded by teens falling in love, and also my experiences as a single woman living in a lot of different places, I think was definitely a combination of inspirations. And I think living overseas definitely completely was part of that narrative of trying to create a culture that felt like it was a combination of different things I'd experienced. I feel like my travels, Maureen asked about my travels, and I feel like Lepidaya, the city itself, is very much influenced by me driving the entire coast of Croatia. And at the time I was dating a guy who was not a fantastic human being, but I had a really great trip. And so it was interesting to see that kind of contrast of like seeing beautiful places, but being with someone who's maybe not a great fit for me, and also like seeing how that could actually go into a narrative, but in a way that it's the character's experience and not mine. And so I think a lot of solo traveling also affected the series, particularly with Hirana's War, because Leonora ultimately has to decide how she is going to fight in this war, and she has to carve out her own terms for how that's going to work. And so I think that's been a huge part of that as well. I think definitely living in Asia and Europe affected the different scenery that I chose. And then my mom asked, you've lived, grown up, and worked in many countries on both sides of the pond. Is there or are there any predominant countries that had an influence on you? I think Japan and Germany have the biggest influence. They're the longest I've lived in a place for a sustained period of time. They're also Axis powers, or former Axis powers, and so that played into things indirectly. Like I didn't really notice that until I had conversations with Brad, and then thought about those conversations, and I was like, oh, in some ways, like that coldness that I sometimes experienced in Germany from people who didn't know me and I didn't know them is a little bit like the Hiranians, particularly the Yarats, which are the more kind of aggressive, the enemy. And then with the Japanese, I loved how that there was this really wonderful strength, particularly my our kind of like adopted family there, how that they had this amazing ability to both be strong but also gentle. And I also just loved living by the ocean. So there's a lot of ocean stuff that Brad was kind of like, does there need to be so much water? Oh my gosh. So I think definitely living by the ocean was a huge, just a huge influence. Ruby has questions about book recommendations. I think right now I'm reading Naomi Novik's Spinning Silver, and I think I definitely recommend that. I also, if you haven't read, I'm trying to think of some others that I've read recently. I really love Maresi by Maria Turchaninov. So this is a really amazing one. Also, The Insomniacs, which is in the other room, by Merit Weisenberg. Just finished it like 3 weeks ago. I love it so much. It's so good. You have to read it. And it just has a beautiful rhythm to it, and just really, really engaging characters, and a really strong female character, which I'm very much a fan of. And then my top advice for young writers is collaborate. As soon as you can, collaborate with someone who is working in that field that you want to work in, and working in that genre that you are interested in writing in. And definitely also make sure that you have some critique partners. Like my critique partner, A.R. Bennett, is an amazing author. And she's on here in the audience, and she has been like lifeline for me. I don't know what I would do without her. Another question was, did you ever consider that your imaginative, creative curse words may in fact be offensive language to the Klingon High Command? Yes! Amen. I love it. Yeah, someone actually said, they're like, I think the way that you're saying those Hiranian words, it sounds like Klingon. And I was like, oh, I didn't mean for it to sound like Klingon. But man, I did watch a lot of Star Trek growing up. And then what's your advice for writers who shy away from writing and sharing writing because they're so self-conscious? Like visual art, it's such a vulnerable process, and I find students getting stuck before they even begin. I think the sooner that you can have at least one person who's not a family member or like a boyfriend or a, someone who doesn't like care deeply about you, see your work, the better, because they're going to be a lot more honest than someone who knows you really well. And so I feel like with my students, we'll show our work first without our names on it. And then eventually everybody gets pretty comfortable having their names there. And I think it's kind of moving into that space of like, I know I have to be vulnerable. And so you just give people little pieces and only give them something that you have gotten it to where you feel like you can't do anything else with it. So you've read it out loud, you've revised it a few times. And so I feel like that's easier, because then when you get feedback, you're like, okay, I need to change this, but I'm not certain, you know, how to go about it. And you give yourself 3 days to let the feedback sink in. Like after I meet with Brad, I usually give myself about 3 days to just kind of go through all my notes and say, okay, you know, this is what I need to do to fix this. Because then it doesn't hurt as much that I had so many errors.
Well, I want to stop you there. No, I don't think error is the right word.
Or that I just didn't think deeply about certain things, that I was like, man.
Well, you can't think deeply about all of it the first time through. That's just impossible. And that's why, like you're saying, you need help, you know, whether it's critique partners or professional editors, or yeah, it's no, they're writing is not a lonely endeavor. I mean, that's a huge misconception. At least good writer, you know, I'm sorry, not good. Professional writers who sustain their writing habit throughout their lives have a community that they rely on.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up, because I am one of those people who, you know, wants everything to be really, really pristine before it goes out. And it's just not possible.
No.
And so, yeah. So thank you so much, Emma, for mentioning that. Cause I worked with Emma last year, and yay, thank you so much. And also a great saying that my critique partner just put into the chat, thank you so much, A.R. Bennett, is it takes a village to write a book. Like it really does.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. So there was a great final question that I'm going to take. And also, if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to definitely email me. You can put your question in my website, which we've got some links that are in the chat. So you can definitely email me your question. I don't want your question to go unanswered. So this final question, and it's going to be a little bit of a spoiler. So if you haven't read Aloya Born, I'm really sorry. Why did Dex and Leonora not end up together? I'm really sorry that's a spoiler. So when I first wrote it, I actually imagined it to be about a half-blind and blind young woman that go on this journey. I didn't know yet if they were going to find her mom or not. And I imagined that they would have some friends that they would meet along the way, but they would stay together. Because for so long I had been fighting against writing a love story. And finally I was like, okay, I am going to write a love story. I'm going to just embrace it. I can do it. Yes. And, you know, also let it be sci-fi as well. And so it was very surprising when she met Tarok, and suddenly she's feeling feelings for him. And suddenly he also is feeling feelings for her. And I was like, wait, this is not how it's supposed to be. And I kept kind of fighting against it. And finally I was like, they want to be together. All right, I guess this is how this is going to go. And so the characters chose that. And I know that sounds really weird, but that's actually what happened. And the more that I listened to who Dex was becoming, when I workshopped him at different like classes that I took in the UK, and like working with different like workshopping different parts with like agent workshops and also with editors there, I realized that Dex was a lot nastier person, and I was fighting against that because I don't like people to be nasty. I want everyone to be nice and polite, but that doesn't work when you're writing a novel. There are people that are downright nasty. And sometimes it's actually, as horrible as it sounds, it's fun to write them, because all those nasty feelings that I hate about myself can just go into that character, and they're no longer inside of me. Yeah. So yeah, so that was really, so that was fun. So please, again, if I didn't get to your question, please feel free to ask it. You can go to my website and use the contact form there to let me know. We are supposed to have a drawing now. Yay! So we have a giveaway. Our first giveaway was the playlist to Hirana's War, which is really lovely. The cover designer, I used one of his designs to make it, and it's a fun playlist. So if you want to check that out, feel free. The next is a drawing for a free copy for 2 people of Aloya Born, the 2nd edition, which you can see behind me. I'm going to grab the book so you can see it up close. Ta-da, with the new fancy cover. Yay. It actually just came out like, I don't know, a month and a half ago, I think. Okay, so drum roll, drum roll, drum roll. Okay, don't look, don't look, don't look. And the first copy of the Loyborn is going to Sam Ritter. Woo, go Sam. And if Sam, like sometimes it happens where the person who got it actually doesn't want it. So I'll just keep this bowl here and I will let someone else have it if they don't want it. Not that I'm assuming that Sam doesn't want it, but I just figured I'd put that out there. Okay, next person is Rowan Buchanan. Woo! Okay, excellent. So I will draw again if either of them don't want it. So the two of them, congratulations for your free copies. We only have 3 minutes left before we're finished. So I only have time to sign one book, I think. And that is, it was at the top of my pile for Rowena Flowers. So I'm going to sign her book and see if my webcam will let us see that. Thank you, Rowena. And Rowena, you can actually start your video and your, what do you call it? Your camera if you want while I'm signing. Yay, Rowena. All right. So those of you who ordered signed books, you'll see two signatures on there. You'll see my name in English, and then you'll also see it in Japanese. Someone actually thought that I was writing in a language from Star Trek, which was kind of funny. And I was like, no. So here we go, Rowena. Ta-da! Awesome. So and those of you who are picking up books, I'll have an email that will go out to you so that you know that when your book is coming. So I wanted to share with you my thank yous because I didn't get a chance to do thank yous. So I just want to share my thank you slide with all of you and just name the people who've been really amazing. Sorry, there we go. Let me just pause it there. So I've had some wonderful people who've been a part of my journey and also have been my patrons. So William Summit, Jody and Mark Jensen, my parents who are amazing, thank you. Also my brother who did the maps, my sister who did the logo for Murasaki Press, Jan Hansen, Audrey Reeder, Yolanda Wilhoit, Fatima Humphreys, muchas gracias, mi hermanita, Cynthia Piron, Vince and Connie Hazen, Andy Bailey, MJ Vaughn, Brad Wilson, mwah, Brianna Steinfort-Springer, mwah, Lexi Kluke, Maggie Gentry, Vanessa Reiser, who did the author video that some of you saw at the beginning, Amanda Bennett, Devin Matson, Gina Springer-Shirley, Rebecca Bushy, Brian Bravo, and so many other people. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you being here. And I look forward to hearing what you think about the books and hearing any other questions you might have. So I'm going to just take a look at the chat really quick before we get off. And thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's so good to see you. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, Maggie. I appreciate you all being here. And I will hopefully talk to you guys either online or hopefully someday we'll be able to see each other in person. So thank you so much for coming and have a great afternoon. And thanks for celebrating with me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm going to close it now. Bye.
Bye.